Startup world is very exciting, right? Like there are these people who are trying to change the world in their own ways, in their own spaces. And I have been part of that. One of the biggest challenge that I faced when I was doing my startups was one, to get people excited about what we are doing and get the money so that you can actually make progress. And secondly, also get mentors, right? People who have certain experiences, those who can guide you, because you may be the smartest entrepreneur in the world, but you can still learn from the experiences of a bunch of folks who are out there. And I realized that given that I have been benefited so nicely by all sort of people through my journey, I think it's time to give back. And that got me into angel investing. That's where I started.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Invest with Dexter. I am Ankit Saraf, Senior Associate at Dexter Ventures. With Invest with Dexter, we have our initiative of inviting angels from different walks of life to speak about their experience and encourage more investors sitting on the fence to start investing. About Dexter Ventures, quickly to speak, we have been investing in the early stage startup space for about 3 years now. Built a portfolio of 30 plus companies across consumer healthcare, B2B SaaS, fintech, basically a sector agnostic approach. Without further ado, I have a very special guest with us today to speak about her experience with angel investing. She's been at the core of investing for quite some time, apart from running a very successful business. Uh, hi, Dr. Vandana, how are you?
Hi, Ankit. First of all, thanks for getting me on this platform. It's really amazing, and it'll be really nice to be able to influence all the people who are thinking about angel investing, are probably on the fence. To just to tell a little bit about me. I think Ankit said Dr. Vandana. So yes, I am a medical doctor. I'm an ophthalmologist by training. I still practice part-time. I'm currently working as a chief strategy officer with a group of eye hospitals called Dr. Agarwal's Eye Hospital. We have 160 plus hospitals across 15 countries. And besides that, I have done a few startups in medtech and in health tech, and of course, services. And I, of course, for the last 4 odd years, I actively angel invest as well. So that's a brief about me, Ankit.
Great, thank you, Dr. Vandana. So you've been an entrepreneur, you've been a part of multiple funds, you've been investing, and you are already at a CXO position with one of the largest eye hospital chains in India. So been there, done that. That's how I would summarize your introduction to me. Right. Thank you, Dr. Vandana, for taking out the time. So, Dr. Vandana, as we were speaking, there are so many things you've done, and you've been investing for 4 years. There are so many asset classes people at your level explore. What really, I'm very intrigued to know what really got you into angel investing.
I think this is something which is, startup world is very exciting, right? Like there are these people who are trying to change the world in their own ways, in their own spaces. And I have been part of that. One of the biggest challenge that I faced when I was doing my startups was one, to get people excited about what we are doing and get the money so that you can actually make progress. And secondly, also get mentors, right? People who have certain experiences, those who can guide you, because you may be the smartest entrepreneur in the world, but you can still learn from the experiences of a bunch of folks who are out there. And I realized that given that I have been benefited so nicely by all sort of people through my journey, I think it's time to give back. And that got me into angel investing. That's where I started.
Got it. That helps, Dr. Vandana. So whenever I speak with people, we speak even we speak often and discuss investments. What's been at the bottom line of angel investing or startup investing overall is it's not just about financial returns. It's always financial returns plus plus. For some, it may be giving, just like you mentioned, giving back to the society, giving back to the entrepreneurs. For some, it may be to stay adept with newer technologies, which also you mentioned about how different people are exploring different technologies, different walks of life, different business models and everything. I think startup investing in itself is a very comprehensive paradigm in itself to, experience all and everything. You may be just a financial investor and yet be so very, very deeply involved and see the journey of how an entrepreneur evolves over the time, right? I think that is something which startup investing is really unfolding for a lot of people across India. Right? Great.
True.
So, Dr. Vandana, without moving, deeper into other things, first I would like to understand your, preferences into sectors and how many investments so far.
So I think given that I am from the healthcare background, and I've worked uh, at least as an operator only in healthcare, definitely that's my first and preferred area of investing,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel that one, I can understand those spaces better. So when I'm investing from a space of little bit better understanding compared to any other space that I'm investing. So that's one. 90% of, so I've done around 30 odd investments, and 90% of my investments have been into healthcare. I've done few investments where I didn't have much knowledge about, but after doing a little bit of, conversation with friends or a little bit of deep dive, I found those spaces to be interesting. And according to me, those were uh, far more risky as investments. Of course, healthcare is not also a non-risky space when you look at investments. But personally, in my mind, given that I am not really a domain expertise, I don't have the domain expertise there. In my mind, I'm taking a bigger risk when I'm investing into something which is completely non-healthcare. Could be e-commerce, could be logistics, could be, and I've invested into a bunch of uh, these startups as well. So yeah, that's the area of my sort of. If you ask one sector that I always look for is healthcare.
Got it. Understood. And if you have to throw some light, Dr. Vandana, on a few success stories, I know 4 years is not a very big timeline or a period, but of course, success just not definitely, entails to exits, but something as a success metric you would have seen across the startups you've invested, and even some learning stories where they could not make the cut or they could not perform to the optimum levels, if you could throw some light on either sides of the pole.
Sure, Ankit. So I think one of my earliest, in fact, my first angel investment was into this US startup. One of my classmates from the US reached out to me that he's exploring this healthcare startup, and he's not from healthcare background, and he would love to get me into the call and get my perspective on whether he should invest or he shouldn't invest. So I got into the call only with the assumption that I'm helping him, but I got so excited with what those folks were doing that I said, okay, I also want to co-invest with you. And that startup, of course, I haven't had any exits so far. You rightly mentioned, Ankit, but I think I look at success here right now in terms of, one is how the startup has scaled, what kind of rounds they have been able to raise, and how impactful it has been. As in, is it really doing what it started, or the whole purpose of that startup, has it been able to achieve that? Right. So I think this one from the US was a great example of that. Normally people say that first few investments you should just forget, but I think as they call beginner's luck, I think my first investment was one of the best investments that I have made. It was in again, of course, in a healthcare space. They were doing remote patient monitoring, which at that time was sort of just a buzzword in the US, but now it's a very common thing. There are many startups who are now competing for the same space, but I think they had a good head start and they're doing pretty well. Besides that, in India also, I have had few investments. Again, one in the healthcare space itself, which has done really well. They are sort of democratizing access to healthcare, especially the blue collar workers, by giving them both insurance as well as access to like primary care clinics. And I think they're doing pretty well, and I do see that they'll scale up. And then I invested into a which also I think is doing well, and I think they are also scaling up pretty well. Is is in basically healthcare and AI space,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to solve a very specific use case in healthcare using AI. enablement, and I think they are also doing pretty well. And then, yeah, one non-healthcare, or I can say semi-healthcare deal, which is also doing well, was in healthcare related products. So it's more of an e-commerce, but the products are more healthcare focused. And I think they're also doing well. They have raised a few rounds after, our angel round. So yeah, some of these startups, I'm very excited about what they are doing and how they are doing it. And yeah, actually one startup that I'm really excited about, which also I think are doing well, they are creating, like this solution for like busy mothers, where you put all the ingredients and you get like a dish ready, right? Like the device basically. Yeah. So, I haven't used the prototype when they started, but I was just so excited with the whole idea of, because I don't know how to cook. So just that whole idea that, oh, I can actually cook for myself without I just need the ingredients and my dish will be ready. Like I just got extremely excited about it. And after my diligence, I realized that they do have some competitors, but nothing well evolved. So, I took a bet on that one as well. So these are some of the good success stories. Besides that, I have few other investments in US, which I think are doing well. Things that have not done well, I think, yeah, there have been few. Especially given the current funding environment, I think some of the startups that I invested into, especially were at the startup boom time, right? Valuations were absolutely high
Yeah.
and everybody was funding everything. They got money very easily. But I think the challenge some of these startups faced was that they're now unable to raise money. The kind of traction that they need to be able to raise money is sort of now very difficult. So I think I'm foreseeing that I think 3 of the startups that I invested into may probably fold eventually. That time period is anyone's guess, but it could be as short as a few months to maybe a year. Sometimes we just linger on doing salvaging capital, just trying to pull the runway. But I feel that they will. So one of them is in healthcare space, one of them is in logistics space, and one of them is in education space. So yeah, so I'm happy that at least my non-healthcare bets are the ones who are, you know what I mean, are the ones which, because they're so inherently I'm now more and more like,
Healthcare focused.
yes, yeah, like I'm just realizing that it's always good to invest into those spaces where you genuinely understand what's going on.
So two perspectives here, Dr. Vandana. So healthcare and the other verticals you mentioned about, right? Healthcare saw a massive uptick during the COVID, right? Healthcare investing, healthcare solutions. But post-COVID, a fair number of them have seen challenges regards to fundraise, regards to scaling, regards to the business model in itself. So help me understand, since you've been investing in healthcare for so long, were there models built just for COVID? Is healthcare in India acquiring? See, healthcare का सबसे बड़ा problem और the biggest problem we've seen across thesis is the cap, which continues to stay over the roof, right? So I'm not talking about the B2B SaaS solutions or the devices for that matter, but more around digital health or distribution or other problems like these, right? So there are two parts to healthcare, and the third part being healthcare financing, which is an evergreen category, right? Healthcare continues to be an over expensive proposition for the entire Indian Janta, and apart from the top 5%, nobody can comfortably be sure for the rest of his or her life that he'll be fine with the healthcare expenses out of pocket, right?
Yeah,
So,
so no, Ankit, I think you're right. Honestly, I think what you're saying is completely right. Several sectors, like for example, telemedicine. Telemedicine saw a huge boost. And not just in India, even in US, some telemedicine startups got like ridiculous valuations and they raised huge amount of money, right? But some of those startups are not doing that well now because the demand for telemedicine is not that great ever since the pandemic has sort of ended, right? So that is true. And as far as CACs are concerned, I think that is surely a problem specifically in India because here, as you rightly mentioned, pay out of pocket is something which is a big hindrance for people to adopt certain products because they have to pay out of pockets, right? And because of that, the CACs are just super high. And this is something I'm seeing across these startups where your primary consumer is basically it's a B2C startup. You're trying to either give a product or a service to consumer where they have to pay out of pocket. 100%. It's a huge challenge. And I do feel that some of these startups, as we have seen, like some of these startups have actually folded in the recent past, either because of the operational inefficiencies or because of the other issues that they have faced inside the startups as well, right? But I think fundamental changes that I'm also seeing is that overall, I think as a human species, I think a majority of us have also become far more sort of accepting of how to take care of your health, right?
Yeah.
And which means, for example, should I get my regular checkups done? If I have a problem, should I go to a doctor very quickly? If certain products, for example, all these multivitamins and the whole bucket of these products are actually doing really, that whole space has become very competitive. So maybe some startups are not doing very well, but overall that space has seen a huge growth, right? People, the products which are around sort of wellness, longevity, devices, your smart watches, your trackers, they have been doing really well. So you're right that certain spaces in healthcare which were doing really well during the pandemic are not necessarily doing very well now, and some of them will fold and have already folded, and certain spaces have actually, because of way we have evolved because of that pandemic, certain spaces are actually benefited and continue to benefit from that.
So yeah, I mean, selective focus on healthcare categories is still a very, lucrative proposition both for the Indian consumer, the Indian entrepreneur who's looking to build here, and of course us investors to take a bet as early as we can, right? I guess that has clearly happened post-COVID, that at least the thesis and healthcare as a larger, tree has at least shown which are the probable green ones or, likely to spread further, and the ones which were low-hanging broke down, I guess. So, yeah, too much, healthcare talks. I want you to focus a little on what else in India.
What else in India? I think in India, lots are going to change. Consumer, the way consumer market is growing, I think anything which is consumer focused, for example, even e-commerce, we are seeing new models now being evolving. On the fintech side also, we are seeing new models which are continuously evolving. On education also, I feel a lot of disruption still needs to happen, even though we have, the Baijus of the world and all of that. But I do feel that some of these models will evolve and will be very specific to like the Indian market and will change and how much AI is going to play a role there is yet questionable. But I do feel that at least if not in the next 4-5 years, then definitely subsequently it is going to play a huge role in some of these sectors, right? So I think consumerism at its best in India right now and will grow. So anything which is sort of focused on that will surely have a good chance of winning the market, if not doing super well.
Got it. Dr. Vandana, so help me understand the next part of it. You've been with Dexter for some time now. You've seen our journey evolve over the years, right? What has been your experience? And, be absolutely candid about it. What has been good, what has been bad, and where do you see us, right? So the question to you is more around, because you've been a part of multiple networks, you've been a part of multiple funds, you've been an advisor to funds. So would love your perspective on us.
No, so, Ankit, of course, you said I have to be very candid, and I will be very candid. I think it's been a great experience. And I'll tell you the mindset that me as an investor has is like when I'm interacting with a startup, obviously the startup may approach me directly. It may come through a friend, it may come through a network. A startup where I already have the background knowledge, like if it is from healthcare, it's much easier for me to take a quick decision. Okay, whether I want to invest, do I like the founders, do I like the space, but whether I want to invest or not. But when it comes to spaces which are outside of my domain expertise, I look for that support from networks like yours, right? And I think you guys are superb in providing that support, the investment thesis, the deep dive on the founders, on the space, on the opportunity, and just justification of why you think it could be a great opportunity. Just reading through that entire document sometimes gives a lot of comfort and gives you a perspective. Okay, like what are you guys thinking? Why are you even, bringing that startup to us? So I think you guys are doing a great job on that. Then second is of course the quality of startups, right? Because if the pipeline of startups that are coming to you, let's say is X, and you only have X by 10 in startup investments that you're going to do, and if you're not getting good startups to begin with, then naturally, your investments are not going to see the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
The quality of the startups that come around has been very decent, I must say. Some of the startups have been really, really amazing, and I've been happy to invest into them. I have missed also certain startups which I thought were really great, but just because of my hectic travel schedules, this that I could not devote time to sort of do a little bit of a dive on that. And I see when the updates come from you guys, oh, this startup is doing. I was like, oh yeah, I missed this startup, right? So I think overall, I do feel that one, you guys get good deals on the table. Secondly, the investment memo and the deep dive you guys do just to make sure that you're bringing really good startups to us is pretty solid. And you guys are very approachable. Anytime we can pick up a phone and have a call with you guys to understand what you're thinking and what are the red flags and this and that, right? So I think overall, I feel you guys have been doing a great job of getting people like me to invest into startups and also getting that match of the entrepreneurs sort of finding the opportunity. Sometimes the traditional VCs are not the right fit at that stage, and I think from that perspective, you're also doing a great job for the entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vandana. And I guess this bigger problem which you mentioned, that today's investor at all times is unavailable to look at an opportunity, and that becomes maybe a good loss, maybe a bad loss for that matter. It has both sides of the spectrum, right? You lose a flight, and it could be the best case scenario for
No,
that.
man, I tell you, as part of another angel group, I got an opportunity to invest into Zepto.
Oh
And that
wow.
time they were into the different avatar. They were a bunch
Yeah.
of college dropouts who was trying to do grocery
Hmm.
delivery, right? And it's a super competitive space. And all of us, like, good bunch of people who were on that call. And we're like, these youngsters, they want to do something in a space which is super competitive. None of us invested.
I think
So yeah, it happens all the time.
so. Devendra, keeps telling us, Ankit, I got an opportunity to participate in Ola. I got an opportunity to participate when Razorpay was pitching. So these were the companies, when I think that had Devendra invested, where would have we been? Right? So that's, of course, positives are something you can always ponder upon. There are companies which Dexter, for that matter, has missed. And that became our thesis of really going ahead with our fund, right? One, for the retail investor, it becomes quintessential that he or she, for that matter, right, gets a portfolio, gets at least a small allocation to that portfolio company, right? May suit his thesis, may not suit his thesis, but at least he's not missing out because of his time constraint, right? Or a liquidity constraint, or a constraint on having to take a much larger time to deep dive and other things, right? Of course, where the thesis matches, you can always double down, you can always increase the allocation. I think with this, aspect, and with this aspect of really helping the entrepreneurs as well, and being more active into this early stage ecosystem, is where the fund comes into the play. And hopefully we can do a better job with that in the coming forward time, right? So yeah, that's that. One final question, Dr. Vandana, before we move into a very exciting segment, which I would call as the rapid fire. Right? Not my brainchild, but brainchild of a Bollywood celeb who really people into his couches. So neither do I have a couch or a coffee, but definitely an interesting segment coming up. So, Dr. Vandana, as I was saying, India is the third largest startup economy, right? which is behind US and China, which are much, much developed. But if we see the angel investors, the count of the angel investors, it's far, far behind, right? We've seen the startups grow, we've seen people make money, we've seen startup as an ecosystem or an angel investing as an ecosystem from being, I'm so sorry, from being just a big boys play to being democratized for even entrepreneurs today, right? The count is still very low. And although it's grown over the time, especially during the pandemic and even now, we expect more and more people to become a part of this asset class. Of course, may not be as high as your gold or the real estates of the world, but of course, a 15% to your entire investment budget is definitely something which every entrepreneur, every person should look at. Of course, after parking his or her primary needs. What is your take, or what is your advice to all these people, and uh, for more so from a woman or a young female professional's perspective, as to why should people look at it, at this asset class, and what should they expect out?
I think, as you rightly mentioned, Ankit, I think diversification is the key when you're investing, right? We'll invest into maybe some safer bets, maybe real estate, mutual funds, etc., right? Which are the traditional jewelry. These are the, gold and all. These are the traditional investments that most Indians tend to look at. And India typically has not even been, I would say, evolved when it comes to investments into these sectors, specifically mutual funds and all. I think we're evolving, but we have not yet reached there. Historically, we are just used to parking our money into FDs or keeping it at home or whatever, right? Like we are just that's how we have been historically. I think changes have been happening, and more people, especially the new generation, is more active around some of these segments. For example, with startups like Zerodha and others, the space has become a little bit more democratized, right? People are more able to sort of do investments into mutual funds. I feel the same will start happening in the angel investing space, because today when you look at professionals, out of whatever money that they have allocated for investments, they need to understand why they should invest into startups, right? It's probably one of the most risky asset classes, right? That's number one. Number two, they may feel that they have no control over this, right? You're giving money to somebody to run a business, but you don't know what they're doing with that money. And that mindset also sometimes hinder people's investments into it. But I do feel, I think one of the things that can really help young professionals, young women who have money and who should and are wanting probably to invest, is basically that these programs like now Shark Tank, for example, is improving their education and knowledge level of what a startup is. It's not like a kirane ki dukan. Traditionally, when you think of a business, that business is supposed to be generating profit from day one. And that mindset, like my parents still don't understand this mindset. Oh, you guys have raised money and you've raised so much money and you're still losing money. Like, how is that even a business? Right? That mindset still exists. So for a lot of people in India to even understand that a startup will eventually be profitable and will eventually solve potentially a bigger problem. But yes, today you don't have the exact visibility of how the money is getting utilized and why the startup is losing money. And so I think it's more on the education, Ankit. I feel that as a country, we are not yet educated on this asset class. And I institutions like yours are doing a great job of getting a lot of people into it and saying that, okay, just come explore. And probably people like me who are already angel investing, when I speak to, let's say, 10 of my friends and I tell them this is what I'm doing, if not 10, if not all 10, one or two of them get interested. Oh, we also want to. So when you are investing, Vandana, you please tell us, we will also invest, right? Like something like that usually happens in at least one or two deals. So I would say, if I have to just give one message, to the young professionals, young women, is that I think if part of the money you can afford to lose and take risk on, angel investing is a great space, because you get an opportunity to become hopefully part of something which is bigger than yourself, and you get an opportunity to really create a difference, besides of course earning returns out of it, right? Because that's the primary goal. You're not doing, most people are not doing samaj seva, they are investing because they want to also get some money out of it. And not be like one of those typical investors who's tracking everyday share market, what is happening. Oh, is my share increasing? Oh, my share is decreasing. Oh, my share is. So that's something like that you can't do with startup investing, right? Like you have to invest and then you have to basically just get your monthly updates, and maybe once in a while you get to talk to the founders, and pretty much if you can help, then help. Pretty much that. So I think it's a great space for people to look at and explore.
Okay. So you mentioned about Shark Tank and parents. Funny anecdote, I was never able to explain to my parents what I actually fully do. Like, iska beta ye engineer, his company, us company, and all that you keep hearing. I now proudly tell my parents, this is what I do. This is my bread and butter. Next time somebody asks you, tell them Shark Tank पे जो होता है वही ये करता है. So at least Shark Tank, for that matter, has made my professional identity clear in my parents and my parents' circle, for that matter. So yeah, it does as well.
No, I hear you.
So that's what Shark Tank has definitely helped us as well. So yeah, jumping on to as I was speaking about the rapid fire category. So three sectors, of course, bracket me apart from healthcare. You would want your 10 years to be, you see India growing in the next 10 years.
So healthcare, definitely number one. Number
Mhm.
two, I think education is something that I, want to see. And I think third would be sort of more around other applications of AI, so to say. When I say other applications, it could be into autonomous vehicles, it could be into solving, like clean energy problems and things like
Okay,
that. And clean energy also is a space which I feel needs to like really evolve, and I would love to invest into that space if I get access to some good startups.
got it. Understood. Three green flags you would like to tick before deciding to invest.
Most important, the founding team. Very,
Okay.
very important. I think the comfort with who the founders are, where they come from, and why they are trying to solve this problem
Mhm.
is for me, it is sort of the first step to even say that I want to look at what the business is. It could be the best business, but if I'm not impressed with the founders, then I don't necessarily look at that opportunity, right? You can change the business, you can't change the founders, right? So yeah, so first and foremost for me is the founding team. The second is how big is the market that they are trying to work in. uh, Given that it's a risky investment and mostly 90% of your investments are actually going to go buzz, you want to make sure that remaining 5 to 10%, which will actually go somewhere, are in a big enough space that you get the returns which will hopefully justify the remaining 90% which go bust, right? So yeah, if it's a very small market, then also something that is a sort of a red flag for me. And so I want a market to be like big enough market. And I think number three is how, so sometimes market is big, founders are great, but the solution is just not scalable because either the market is not ready for it, so the right timing, so to
Mhm.
say, whether the market is ready for it, how scalable it is, how easy for it would be for them to like sell the product that they are selling, right? So if these three buckets are sort of ticked for me, then definitely these are like the three green ticks for me, and I say, okay, let's now do a deep dive on whether I want to invest or not.
Three red flags for a no-go.
Three red flags, again, I think very similar red flags. If the founding team, let's say, has lack of clarity of what they are trying to do, why they are trying to do it, what's in it for them, what exactly. Like, if I feel I'm not comfortable with the founders, I don't usually invest. If it's a really small market, again, I think it's coming down to from the same perspective that if it's a really small market, then I don't like to invest. And thirdly, I think if founders are all over the place, they don't have a clear GTM, they're trying to solve too many problems, at least in the beginning. Sure, maybe at a later stage you can solve 10 problems, but maybe in the beginning you need to solve only one problem. So if I see that lack of clarity, lack of thought, lack of coherence, even though the founding team is very strong from a background perspective, but from an execution perspective, I see that they are not yet there. Maybe they've never done a startup and they don't understand that a startup doesn't run like, maybe like an evolved corporate, which can afford to do all of that. They have resources, they have the bandwidth, and they have, all kinds of things to do it. So then also I sort of, decide not to invest.
Understood. Got it. Three questions on the this or that. You mentioned about one of them. Let me dive deeper into it. Founder with an institutional background, a strong institutional background, or founder with strong operating experience in the category?
100% the latter. Somebody who has the operating experience in the space, knows what are the challenges in the space. So even when they're trying to do something which seems very easy, they'll hopefully exactly know what challenges they're likely to face. And they'll also know what problems they are trying to solve because they have worked into that space. So they know the problem. I think definitely for me, the latter.
Okay.
And also, I think people who work into the institution sometimes forget how to hustle. And I think startups, at least in the beginning, it's all about hustling. It's all about taking rapid decisions and moving on and learning from them. And as they say, there are no mistakes as long as you're learning your lessons from them. So I think sometimes you need that mindset, which I feel sometimes people who have been into only corporate sector for a very long time may lack a little bit.
Correct. Again, another question from the same factor you mentioned: large market with several VC funded players, or a growing market but still considered a white space?
So I think again the latter. See, if it's a large market and there are several VC funded spaces, it's a competitive market. Even though it's a large market and maybe another startup will come and occupy maybe 5-10% of that market compared to the other startups, but that's not necessarily a large market in that sense. Right.
Okay.
And if you're investing into a startup which has already done several rounds with VCs and you're coming at a later stage, then there's not much meat into it for you anymore. Right. Though it's a safer investment at that stage, but it's no longer meaningful. So I surely look at something which is a growing market, where that there's a potential, to create much bigger and bigger impact, and it's not as competitive yet. So yeah, so the second one.
Got it. Three scenarios: startup which is profitable from day one, startup which is not yet profitable but profitable in the foreseeable future, and startup which is all hyper growth focused. Profitability comes when it comes.
The first two will be ideal. First of all, a startup which is profitable may not come to you for investments. Like look at Zero, the case in point. They never raised a single round, right? The startup which I think the second is the most ideal, if you ask me, in the ideal world, but we don't get really many of such startups. What we get are the third ones where founders are very focused on growth. And for them, yes, profitability is the goal, but it's a distant goal. It's not a goal which is sort of, at least in the immediate or midterm, they're looking at. It's a sort of a late goal for them, given that we invest at a much earlier stages. So if you ask me, my ideal would be second. I don't get access to such deals, especially in the earlier stages. Most founders know that they won't be profitable for a long time, and they'll have to raise maybe several rounds before they'll reach that level. So yeah, it's a third which we end up investing into most of the time.
But my final question: pre-seed startup or a seed startup at a decent valuation, or a startup with a premium valuation having achieved its PMF already?
So I think either is fine, Ankit. If it has achieved a PMF, there is definitely a little bit of a lesser risk. As long as it's not too further, like for example, it has done, let's say, seed round, and now it is doing, let's say, a pre-series A bridge round. I'm happy to be part of that bridge round, because once you go to series A and above, then of course the valuations start rising very rapidly if the startup is doing well. And pre-seed and seed is something that I'm always excited about, because they are very early stage. They are still trying to sort of figure it out. And if that's a space which is, as I said, founding team and the space which seems exciting, then I am definitely for it as well.
Got it. Great, Dr. Vandana, brings me to the closure of this podcast. Thank you so much for taking out time. It's been a pleasure getting your perspective. I hope more and more people especially women folk, see this podcast, get a hint of this whole asset class ecosystem, and become a part of it as soon as possible. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you for getting me on this platform. It was very interesting talking to you. I think talking to you also helped me clarify some of my own mental models about how I think about startups. And of course, I would be very happy if I can influence either through this podcast, or even if somebody wants to reach out to me directly and understand what is in it for them to invest into startups and get into angel investing and look at this asset class a little bit more seriously. So yeah, thank you very much.